I sat in my office, staring at the retirement papers on my desk. 40 years. 40 years I'd built Mitchell and Edwards Construction from nothing, and now I was supposed to just let go. Hand it over to Paul Mitchell, my partner, my best friend for 3 decades, the man I trusted with my life. But something felt wrong, a knot in my stomach that wouldn't go away. Maybe it was just cold feet about retirement. That's what my wife kept saying. Edward, you're overthinking this. Paul loves that company as much as you do. That was the problem. I wasn't sure anymore if that was true. Let me back up. I'm Edward Harrison, 62 years old, and for the past 40 years I've poured everything into Mitchell and Edwards Construction. Paul and I started it in 1985 with nothing but a pickup truck and a dream. We were 22, fresh out of college, stupid enough to think we could compete with the big companies in Southern California. We survived the lean years, the times when we couldn't pay ourselves for months, the recession in 2008 that nearly killed us. Through it all, Paul was there. We weren't just business partners, we were brothers. Our families vacationed together. Our kids grew up together. When Paul's son needed surgery, I covered the bills without hesitation. When my father died, Paul was the one who held me up at the funeral. So when I told him 6 months ago that I wanted to retire, to finally enjoy life with my wife Margaret before we got too old, Paul seemed supportive, excited even. "You deserve it, Ed," he'd said, clapping me on the shoulder. "You've earned every day of that retirement. I'll take care of things here. Don't worry." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him. But then came the irregularities. Small things at first. Clients mentioned payments I didn't remember authorizing. Invoices that seemed off. Nothing I could put my finger on, just a feeling. That instinct you develop after decades in business. I told myself I was being paranoid. That it was just retirement jitters, making me see problems where there weren't any. Margaret certainly thought so. "Edward, honey," she'd say gently, "you're looking for reasons to not retire. You've been working since you were 16. It's scary to stop, but you need to trust Paul. He's been your partner for 40 years. She was right about the fear. Retirement did terrify me. What would I do with myself? Who was I without the company? But that didn't mean my instincts were wrong. It was a Tuesday morning in October when everything changed. I was meeting with our accountant, Rachel Chen. She'd been with us for 5 years, sharp, meticulous, and honest to a fault. I'd called her in to go over the retirement transition, make sure all the financial transfers were in order. She came into my office and closed the door. That was my first clue something was wrong. Rachel never closed doors. "Mr. Harrison," she said, and her voice was shaking slightly, "I need to show you something. But before I do, I need you to know that I've struggled with whether to bring this to you. I don't want to cause problems, but I can't. I can't stay silent anymore." My mouth went dry. "Rachel, what is it?" She opened her laptop and turned it toward me. "These are payment authorizations from the past 6 months. They're made to look like they have your approval, but—" she zoomed in on several signatures. "These aren't your signatures, Mr. Harrison. They're close, very close, but they're not yours. I know because I've processed your signatures for 5 years." I looked at the screen. She was right. The signatures looked like mine at first glance, but the E in Edward was slightly different. The way I always looped it was missing. "How much?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "So far? About $400,000. Spread across multiple accounts, small amounts that wouldn't trigger immediate red flags. But Mr. Harrison, there's more." She pulled up another file. "There's a secondary company registered 3 months ago. Pacific Coast Construction Services. The owner is listed as Paul Mitchell." My heart stopped. "What?" "He's been routing our major clients to this new company, underbidding us by using our own resources. The equipment rentals we've been paying for, half of them are actually being used for Pacific Coast projects. The materials we've ordered, same thing. He's essentially stealing from Mitchell and Edwards to build a competing company." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "Why? Why are you telling me this now?" Rachel looked uncomfortable. "I only discovered the full extent yesterday. I'd noticed small discrepancies before, but I thought they were just accounting errors. When you asked me to prepare the retirement transition documents, I did a deep audit to make sure everything was clean. That's when I found all of this." She pulled up more files. Bank statements, equipment rental agreements, Client contracts with Pacific Coast. It was all there. Months of careful, systematic theft. There's something else, Rachel said quietly. Last week, I overheard Mr. Mitchell on the phone. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I was just walking past his office. He was talking to someone about your retirement timeline. He said, and I quote, "Once the old man signs over his shares, I'll have full control. Give it 6 months, then we'll bankrupt Mitchell and Edwards and move everything to Pacific Coast. The creditors can fight over the corpse." I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. This was Paul, my friend, my brother, the man who'd stood beside me for 40 years. Why? I finally managed to ask. Why would he do this? Rachel shook her head. I don't know, Mr. Harrison, but you need to protect yourself. If you sign those retirement papers without addressing this, you could lose everything. The way the transition is structured, you'd still be partially liable for company debts for the next 3 years. If he bankrupts the company after you leave, you'll be on the hook for millions. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. 40 years. 40 years of partnership, of friendship, of trust. And this whole time, or at least for the past 6 months, Paul had been planning to destroy me. Does he know you know? I asked. I don't think so. I've been very careful. Good. Keep it that way. Don't tell anyone about this meeting. Can you make me copies of everything you found? Already done. She pulled a USB drive from her pocket. Everything's on here. And Mr. Harrison, I'm sorry. I know you two were close. After Rachel left, I sat alone in my office for a long time. The retirement papers were still on my desk, mocking me. I'd been so ready to sign them, so ready to trust Paul with everything I'd built. My phone buzzed. A text from Paul. Hey buddy, lunch today? We should celebrate. Only 2 weeks until your retirement party. I stared at that message, the casual betrayal of it. He was planning my retirement party while simultaneously planning to destroy me. I texted back. Sure. Noon at Giuseppe's? Perfect. Can't wait. I had 2 weeks. 2 weeks to figure out what to do. 2 weeks before I was supposed to sign over my life's work to a man who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to remove. I called my lawyer, James Chen, Rachel's uncle actually, and a man I'd trusted for 20 years. James, I need to see you. Today, and bring someone who specializes in financial fraud. Edward, what's wrong? Everything, I said. Everything is wrong. By that afternoon, I was sitting in James's office with him and Karen Wu, a forensic accountant who'd helped send several white-collar criminals to prison. I showed them everything Rachel had found. Karen went through it methodically, her face growing grimmer with each page. This is sophisticated, she said finally. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. They created a perfect paper trail that would have passed most audits. If your accountant hadn't been so thorough, you wouldn't have caught this until it was too late. Can we prosecute? I asked. Absolutely. This is embezzlement, fraud, possibly racketeering if he's involved others. But Edward, James leaned forward. Prosecution takes time. What's your immediate priority? Protecting yourself or getting justice? Both, I said firmly. I want both. James and Karen exchanged glances. That's going to be tricky, Karen said. If we tip our hand too early, he could destroy evidence or move assets offshore. But if we wait too long to secure the company, he could do serious damage. So what do we do? James thought for a moment. We need to document everything, get concrete proof that would hold up in court, and we need to do it without alerting Paul. How? Do you have access to his office? Of course. I have keys to everything. Then tonight, after everyone's gone, we go through his office. With a camera, we document everything we find. No touching, no moving things, unless we can put them back exactly. Just evidence gathering. Isn't that illegal? It's your building, your company, your office space. You have every right to access it. And anything we find related to fraud against the company is discoverable. We'll be careful to do this right. That night, I found myself doing something I never imagined I'd do, sneaking through my own building like a thief. James was with me, along with Karen and a private investigator named Marcus Stone. Paul's office looked normal at first. The photos of his family on the desk, his wife Susan, his kids. I'd known those kids since they were born. My throat tightened. Focus, Edward, James said quietly. We need to do this quickly. We found it all in his locked filing cabinet. Marcus picked the lock in under 30 seconds. Inside were folders labeled with project names I didn't recognize. Pacific Coast projects, all of them. Contracts with our clients, using our pricing, our bids, everything we'd developed over decades. Karen photographed everything while Marcus filmed. We found emails Paul had printed out, conversations with someone named David Reeves about the transition strategy and liquidating assets before the bankruptcy filing. "Who's David Reeves?" I asked. Marcus looked him up on his phone. "Attorney. Specializes in corporate restructuring and bankruptcy law." My hands were shaking as I held one of the printed emails. It was dated 3 weeks ago. "Paul, everything's in place. Once Harrison signs the retirement papers, we can begin phase 2. The company has enough debt that we can justify bankruptcy within 6 months. Your new company will be positioned to buy the assets at auction for pennies on the dollar. Harrison will be retired and won't have standing to challenge it. David. Perfect. Make sure he doesn't suspect anything. The retirement party is a nice touch. Keep him focused on the emotional goodbye while we prep the legal framework. Paul. Don't worry. Ed's sentimental. He trusts me completely. This will be easier than taking candy from a baby." I had to sit down. The casual cruelty of it. The calculated betrayal. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or a desperate financial decision. This was months of careful planning to destroy me. "We have enough," Karen said softly. "Edward, we have more than enough for criminal prosecution and civil recovery." "What happens now?" I asked. James put a hand on my shoulder. "Now we set a trap. We let Paul think everything is going according to his plan. Meanwhile, we file an emergency motion with the court to freeze company assets and secure an injunction against any unauthorized transfers. We do it the morning of your retirement party, 2 weeks from now. Maximum impact, minimum time for him to react. And then we prosecute, both criminally and civilly. We get back every penny he stole, and we make sure he faces consequences." The next 2 weeks were the hardest of my life. I had to act normal, had to smile at Paul's jokes, had to pretend I didn't know he was planning to destroy everything I'd built. The worst was the retirement party planning. Paul was so enthusiastic about it. "We're inviting everyone, Ed. All the old crew, all the clients. It's going to be a night to remember. A night to remember." He had no idea how right he was. Margaret noticed something was wrong. "Edward, you've been so tense lately. Are you having second thoughts about retiring?" I wanted to tell her. God, I wanted to tell her everything. But James had been clear. The fewer people who knew, the better. One slip, one wrong word, and Paul might run. "Just processing everything," I told her, which wasn't entirely a lie. 40 years is a long time to walk away from. The night before the retirement party, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the good times. The early days when Paul and I had worked 18-hour days. The time we'd won our first major contract and celebrated by getting drunk in the office. His wedding, where I'd been the best man. My daughter's college graduation, where Paul had been so proud, as if she were his own child. How do you reconcile those memories with what I knew now? How do you process that someone you loved like a brother could do this? I got up around 3 in the morning and went to my home office. I pulled out old photo albums. There we were, 22 years old, standing in front of our first job site. So young, so naive. We'd promised each other we'd always be honest, always be fair, always be brothers. I closed the album and went back to bed. Tomorrow, I'd find out if I was strong enough to do what needed to be done. The retirement party was held at the Riverside Country Club. Paul had really gone all out, catered dinner, open bar, a slideshow of highlights from our 40 years in business. Over 200 people attended, employees, clients, competitors, friends. Paul gave a speech. "Edward Harrison is more than my business partner," he said, his voice full of emotion. "He's my brother, my best friend. 40 years ago, we started this journey together with nothing but determination and trust. That trust has been the foundation of everything we've built. Ed, I promise you, I will guard that legacy with my life. Mitchell and Edwards will thrive, and your name will always be honored here." People applauded. Some were crying. Margaret squeezed my hand. If I hadn't known better, I would have believed every word. Paul looked so sincere, so genuine. I gave my speech next. I kept it short. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for 40 years of hard work and dedication. This company has been my life, and knowing it's in good hands makes it possible to let go. Or at least, knowing it was supposed to be in good hands. A few people looked confused at that last line, but I smiled and raised my glass, and the moment passed. After dinner, as people were mingling, James pulled me aside. The court opened at 8 this morning. The injunction was granted at 8:15. All company accounts are frozen. The sheriff is serving Paul the papers as we speak. My heart started pounding. Already? I saw him step outside about 5 minutes ago to take a call. That was probably his bank notifying him that his accounts were frozen. Sure enough, a moment later, Paul came back inside. His face was pale. His hands were shaking. He caught my eye across the room, and for just a second, I saw confusion. Then, slowly, I saw understanding dawn. He walked over to me, moving through the crowd like a man in a dream. "Ed, can we talk? Privately?" "Of course." I led him to a small conference room off the main hall. James followed at a distance. Paul closed the door and turned to me. "Ed, what's going on? I just got a call from the bank. All the company accounts are frozen. They said there's a court order." "Sit down, Paul." "Ed, sit down." Saturday, I'd never used that tone with him before. I pulled out a folder and opened it on the table. Pacific Coast Construction Services. $400,000 in fraudulent payments. Systematic theft of clients, equipment, and resources. Plans to bankrupt Mitchell and Edwards within 6 months of my retirement. I looked at him. Did I miss anything? The color drained from his face. "Ed, I can explain." "Can you? Can you explain why my best friend of 40 years has been systematically planning to destroy me? Can you explain why you've been stealing from our company to build a competing one? Can you explain this?" I pulled out the printed email. "Taking candy from a baby? That's what our friendship meant to you?" He didn't speak, just stared at the papers in front of him. "Why, Paul?" My voice cracked. "We've been through everything together. I've been there for every major moment of your life. You've been there for mine. Why would you do this?" He finally looked up at me, and what I saw in his eyes chilled me. Not remorse, not shame, anger. "You want to know why?" he said, his voice low. "Because I'm tired of being second. Tired of it always being Ed's company. Mitchell and Edwards, your name comes first, even though we founded it together. You make the final decisions, you get the recognition. I've spent 40 years in your shadow, Ed." "That's not true." "It is true." He stood up, his voice rising. "Every article about the company focuses on you. Every award ceremony. You're the one on stage. Everyone calls it Ed Harrison's company. I've put in the same hours, the same sweat, the same sacrifice, but I'm invisible. So your solution was to steal from me? To destroy what we built together? No, my solution was to finally build something that's mine. Something where I'm not playing second fiddle to Edward Harrison and his grand vision. I was going to let you retire in peace, Ed. You would never have known. You would have thought Mitchell and Edwards just struggled without you and eventually closed. You would have been sitting on a beach somewhere while I built Pacific Coast into what our company should have been all along, with me in charge." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Paul, Mitchell, and Edwards is yours as much as mine. We're equal partners. Always have been. On paper, maybe, but not in anyone's mind. Not in yours." "That's insane." "Is it? Tell me honestly, Ed, when you thought about retirement, did you consider that maybe I should buy you out instead of you just handing me the reins like you were doing me some kind of favor? Did it ever occur to you that maybe I wanted to purchase my way to full control instead of accepting it as a gift from the great Edward Harrison?" I opened my mouth and closed it again. He was right. I'd assumed Paul would be grateful for me to retire and leave him in charge. I'd never asked if he wanted to buy me out. I'd never even considered it. "But even if I got that wrong," I said slowly, "that doesn't justify theft. Fraud. Planning to bankrupt the company and leave me liable for millions in debt. You would have been fine, Ed. You've got savings, investments. You would have survived. Meanwhile, I would have finally gotten what I've earned. By destroying what we built? By betraying our friendship?" "Our friendship?" Paul laughed bitterly. "Ed, we haven't been real friends in years. We're business partners who are friendly. There's a difference. You have your life, I have mine. We don't actually know each other anymore. Not really. This is just business. Just business. I shook my head. I was at your son's bedside when he had surgery. I held your hand when your father died. I've been to every birthday, every holiday, every milestone for 40 years. That was just business to you? For a moment, just a moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Regret, maybe. Or doubt. But then it hardened again. None of that changes what you did, he said. You froze our accounts. You're trying to destroy my company over what? Some accounting irregularities? Accounting irregularities? I stood up. Paul, you stole $400,000. You forged my signature. You created a shell company to steal our clients. You were planning to commit bankruptcy fraud. These aren't irregularities. They're crimes. The door opened. James stepped in with 2 police officers, and Karen Wu. Paul Mitchell? One officer said. Yes? You're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and forgery. You have the right to remain silent. I watched them handcuff him. Watched him look at me with what might have been betrayal, as if I'd betrayed him. Ed, he said as they led him to the door, please, don't do this. We can work this out. No, I said quietly. We really can't. They took him out through a side door so the party wouldn't see. I stood alone in the conference room for a long time after they left. Margaret found me there 20 minutes later. Edward? Everyone's asking where you went. What happened to Paul? I told her everything. She listened in shocked silence, tears running down her face. Oh, honey, she said, pulling me into a hug. I'm so sorry. I know how much you loved him. I still do, I admitted. That's the worst part. Even after everything, I still love him like a brother. How pathetic is that? It's not pathetic. It's human. We went back to the party. I made an announcement that Paul had a family emergency and had to leave. We finished the evening, and people went home none the wiser about what had actually transpired. The next day, the story broke. Local news picked it up first. Then it spread. Longtime business partners in fraud scandal. 40-year friendship ends in arrest. Construction company owner embezzles from partner. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Clients wanted assurance we were stable. Employees wanted to know if their jobs were safe. Competitors smelled blood in the water. I came out of retirement. Had to. Mitchell and Edwards needed someone at the helm, and I was all that was left. I brought in new management, restructured the company, and personally called every major client to assure them we were sound. The trial took 8 months. Paul pleaded not guilty initially, claiming I was fabricating evidence out of jealousy or spite. But the forensic evidence was overwhelming. The forged signatures, the bank records, the emails. His own lawyer advised him to take a plea deal. He got 4 years in federal prison and was ordered to repay everything he'd stolen plus damages. Pacific Coast Construction Services was dissolved. His share of Mitchell and Edwards was liquidated to pay restitution. I saw Susan, his wife, once during all this. She came to my office, crying, Ed, please. The lawyer's fees are destroying us. The kids are devastated. Can't you just let it go? For the sake of our families? I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But I thought about the email. Taking candy from a baby. I thought about how he'd looked at me with anger, not remorse, when I confronted him. Susan, I'm sorry. I truly am. But Paul didn't just steal money. He tried to destroy me. If I'd signed those retirement papers, I'd be the one in financial ruin right now, while he built his empire on the ashes of our company. I can't let that go. Not for him. Not for anyone. She left without another word. Mitchell and Edward survived. It took a year of hard work, but we recovered. I restructured it as a sole proprietorship under my name, Harrison Construction Company. Fresh start. New beginning. But I never really recovered, not fully. I look at photos from 40 years ago and see a stranger, that naive 22-year-old who thought loyalty and friendship were enough to build a business on, who trusted completely, who never imagined his best friend could betray him. Sometimes I wonder if Paul was right. Maybe I did overshadow him. Maybe I did take him for granted. Maybe if I'd been more aware, more considerate of his ego, things would have turned out differently. But then I remember that email, that cold, calculated plan to destroy me, and I know that even if I'd done everything perfectly, even if I'd been the ideal partner, Paul had made a choice. He chose theft over honesty. He chose betrayal over communication. He chose to see our friendship as a weakness to exploit rather than a strength to preserve. I'm 63 now. Harrison Construction is doing well. My retirement is secure. I won the legal battle. I protected myself and my family. By every objective measure, I should feel victorious. But I don't, because I lost something far more valuable than money. I lost 40 years of friendship. I lost the man I'd called brother. I lost my faith in the idea that loyalty and trust matter in business. Margaret tells me I did the right thing. My lawyer tells me I did the right thing. My kids tell me I did the right thing, and intellectually, I know they're correct. But late at night, when I can't sleep, I still find myself wondering, was there another way? Could I have reached him somehow? Could our friendship have been saved? I'll never know. Paul's still in prison. He's got another year on his sentence. I've received letters from him, 3 so far. I haven't opened any of them. I don't know if I ever will. The business world is full of stories like mine. Partnerships that end in betrayal. Friends who become enemies. Trust that turns out to be misplaced. I used to think we were different. That our bond was too strong to break. I was wrong. And that's the real lesson I learned. It's not that you shouldn't trust people. It's not that friendship in business is impossible. It's that you need to verify that trust constantly. You need to have checks and balances. You need to protect yourself even while extending faith to others. Trust, but verify. Love, but protect yourself. Build together, but never put yourself in a position where someone else's betrayal can destroy you completely. These are the lessons I learned at 62 years old. Lessons I wish I'd learned at 22. Lessons I hope I can pass on to others before they make my mistakes. Mitchell and Edwards Construction, the company Paul and I built together, doesn't exist anymore. Harrison Construction Company stands in its place. More successful, more secure, more protected, but also more lonely. Success isn't just about money or business growth. It's about the people you share it with. And when you lose those people, especially in the way I lost Paul, the success feels hollow. I think about that sometimes as I sit in my office. I think about the young men we were, full of dreams and trust. I think about the life we built together. And I mourn for what could have been, even as I'm grateful I discovered the truth before it was too late. Justice was served. I protected myself. The company survived. But I still lost something irreplaceable. And that's the truth. They don't tell you about these stories. Sometimes there is no happy ending. Sometimes you win the battle but lose the war. Sometimes justice feels a lot like grief. That's my story. The story of how I discovered my best friend of 40 years was planning to destroy me. How I had to choose between friendship and survival. How I learned that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who can hurt you the most. I don't regret the choice I made, but I'll spend the rest of my life mourning the fact that I had to make it.